Welcome, welcome. Hello, my name is Dr. April Willis, and I am so excited to spend part of my afternoon with you today on behalf of Proximity Learning. You'll also hear us call ourselves PLI, Proximity Learning Inc., PLI. We are all the same company, and we are honored to be able to host another webinar for you where we are talking to distinguished school leaders and administrators as they are talking through some thought leadership questions with us. We want to make sure that we are here as a trusted resource for you. And one of the best ways we can do that is by bringing your peers, your leaders, your boots on the ground, and your administrators in the field onto our webinar so that we can kind of pick their brain for you. And we also want to give you the opportunity to ask them any questions you might have as well. So before we jump right in, I would love to start with just a few logistical items. Please note that you all have the opportunity to use the chat box. In the chat box, you're welcome to drop your commentary, where you're from, or any other type of team building activities and conversations you'd like to have. However, if you do have a question for Dr. Claudio, our guest today, we encourage you to use the Q&A box. That's where I will be continuously checking in to make sure all of your questions are getting answered. So I'm not checking the chat box, but I am checking the Q&A box. Make sure you drop those questions in there. And the only other thing I'd like to let you know is even though we've got this webinar scheduled for an hour, we do not anticipate it taking the entire hour. Our goal is to get you out of here in about 30 to 40 minutes today, and we hope in doing so, we're able to provide you all of the substance you were hoping to get out of attending this webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. I am honored to have today on our webinar as the guest, Dr. Claudio. Dr. Claudio, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, of course. So before I start with our questions, I'd love to know if you'd be willing to share just a little bit about your background, where you're at, and what your history has been as an administrator.
Yeah. So I am in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We're on the southeast side. Harrison School District 2 is on the southeast side of Colorado Springs. I have been in public education for 21 years now. Prior to that, I was a Marine and came into public education as an elementary school teacher because I was teaching adults while I was in the Marines. Actually spent about 10 years instructing adults. And so I figured a natural transition would be to go into public education with little kids. And so I love the elementary level. I appreciate the middle school, high school. I'm still kind of shaky with that. But I became an assistant principal at Monterey Elementary, became the principal there as well, spent 7 years as a principal, and then moved over to the support side, student support, for about 3 years. And now I'm over personnel support services. That includes professional development, New Staff Institute. It includes induction, the technology side of the house, the mainframe side of technology, and COVID. Believe it or not, we're still dealing with COVID here in our district, and any new opportunities that come my way. So I'll share with you 3 initiatives that I'm working on right now, because we're talking about the addressing teacher vacancies. We're working with our community college, see if they can create a teacher prep program in their community college to where our kids can go right into their community college and graduate with a 4-year degree and become a teacher for our district. The reason we want to do that is we have the opportunity to then reduce the tuition that they have to pay by about 40 to 50%. So instead of paying a university, $60,000, we could probably get them out of the community, the state college, for about $15,000, $20,000, which is huge. The other thing that I'm working on is affordable housing. Believe it or not, nowhere in my wildest dreams that I would ever think that affordable housing would be part of my job description, but it has become, these last couple of years, with inflation going as high as it has been, for me to work with some nonprofit organizations to be able to put our teachers in a place to where their salary does become a living wage, as opposed to paying $1,200, $1,300 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. And then the last piece is just trying to figure out how to increase teacher salaries. So those are some of the initiatives that we're working on in our district to be able to recruit and retain teachers in our district.
Wow, that's incredible. And that was quite the introduction. So I don't even know if we need to go through the questions I prepared for us. So just let's dive deep into that. If you are listening, I'm sure you have all kinds of questions right now. Please do use that Q&A box. We'll be making sure to answer your questions throughout the presentation, or at the very least at the end of the presentation. So let's keep it going. Before we figure out a little bit more about what your district specifically is doing, I want to know how your district has been impacted by these shortages. So before you came to your solutions, how did you know this was a problem? What did that look like?
Well, we immediately felt the shortages right before COVID, right before the pandemic. We were starting to see a decline in the number of teachers or college students entering teacher prep programs. And so we started, when we used to have 30, 40, 50 people apply for positions, we were getting 8, 9, or 10. And so we knew that there was something going on with the pipeline. And so we had to really start thinking quickly about what we can do to get people in the classroom immediately. But I'll tell you, even the stuff that we have done, it's long-term. It hasn't been an immediate impact. Last night, I was in a district accountability committee meeting, and we asked teachers, how's it going? A lot of them said that they're tired. They're just wore out. They're ready for the year to be over. We've seen a decrease in the number of our guest teachers in our district, and actually in all of Colorado Springs, which is requiring teachers now to, instead of using their planning time to plan, they're using their planning time to cover classes because there's just not enough teachers and not enough guest teachers. And at the end of the day, all of that impacts a kid's ability to come to school ready to learn. So teachers are tired, not enough people coming into the profession, all impacting the way students come ready to go to school and learn.
Absolutely. And I like your point where you had noticed this trend prior to COVID, because what we tend to hear is everybody's blaming COVID for this. But I agree with you. This was actually trending before COVID. Now, COVID absolutely exacerbated the problem, because all of a sudden, what slimming population we had of people who were considering themselves to be teacher candidates all of a sudden was drastically reduced. And so, yes, it was definitely part of the problem. It definitely made the problem worse than it was, but it was happening prior to COVID. So I think that's an interesting note that you guys have taken note of. And so let's talk about why you believe this is one of the greatest reasons for teachers. What do you think teachers are leaving the classroom for?
It's multifaceted, and I'll share with you why it's multifaceted. The first thing people always go to is the fact that the salaries aren't keeping up with the cost of living, right? That's the first thing that we go to. And we understand that, and we realize that when we look at ourselves in Colorado Springs area, we're number 3 on the salary ranges. We have a school district that is impacted by military aid. So we don't compare ourselves to them because they get $3.5–4 million every year that we don't get. But it's the inflation that's really hurting us as we look at, when we can provide increases to our staff. So even though the inflation might be at 8%, we may only be able to give a 3 to 4% increase. I talked a little bit about affordable housing. Their salaries just aren't enough, but it has nothing to do with salaries. Salary is a big portion of it. It's about the job satisfaction. And I think that there are a lot of people that are coming into education and really want to change the world, but when they see how much work there is behind it, they get a little skeptical. And so what we're noticing is we got a lot of first-year teachers who really want to make a change, but when they look at their economy, right, the cost-benefit analysis of becoming a teacher and making a difference, they don't see that as the great benefit. And so I'll share with you a couple of stories. We've had a teacher leave to be a concrete truck driver because he was able to make more money as a concrete truck driver, and his schedule was a little bit more flexible. And we have several other stories like that. But at the end of the day, it's what we're trying to do with morale. It is what we're trying to do to increase people's fondness of being back into a profession that really makes a difference in our community. And so, yes, salary is a huge part, but what are the things that are intangibles that we can create in order to keep folks in the classroom?
Perfect. I really like this idea too that you're starting to touch on about the impact individuals want to make as educators. We know that we have a large population of teachers who have hit retirement age, and so we're starting to lose that group. the incoming group, our pipeline of our alpha generation, those students specifically, research has already shown that there is a huge part of them that want to be a part of social change and social responsibility. And they feel this impetus to not necessarily have to achieve at work, but to make a difference at work. And so if we don't start meeting the needs of this new generation that's coming in, it's one of those things that's so interesting because we're in education and we have a tendency to do things the same way, decade after decade after decade with minimal change. And we try to preach it to our teachers. It's time to get collaborative. It's trying to put our desks together instead of in rows. And we're trying to incorporate technology and do some of this new cutting edge stuff in the classroom. But at the same time, like, we have to continuously remind ourselves that it's not just saying those words and it's not just that talk, but really understanding our learners where they're at. And right now, where our learners are at is preparing to become teachers, and where our teachers are at is we have to meet those needs if we want to meet the staffing needs that we have in the classroom. So great points on all of that. I appreciate you sharing that background. But what recruiting methods have you started employing, and how successful are those efforts?
So as I shared earlier, we have been seeing the decline in the number of people coming into education. So we've done a couple of things. The first thing that we did was we started providing a stipend for any of our classified staff who want to become teachers. We pick up the cost of their ability to go through a alternative teacher license program. And so we pay the $6,000. As long as they commit to giving us 3 years, we will pick up that cost to include the initial payment and then the 2 years that they're in the program. We have been able to successfully graduate 15 of those ESP who want to become teachers, our paraprofessionals who want to become teachers. We've been able to, again, bring on 15. We've got 5 in the pipeline right now, because we know that's a way not only to bring our ESP into the teaching mix, but also to diversify our workforce. We've also created a teacher cadet program. I don't know if you're familiar, Dr. Willis, about a teacher cadet program. So we have courses at the high school right now that where kids, if they're interested in becoming a teacher or work in the teaching profession, they literally can take college level courses so they can get the experience of being a teacher. And then if they want to become a teacher, then they can go through our community college and then go to a university to get years 3 and 4 through that teacher prep program. And so we've got 4 kids in there right now. We just started the program this year. We've got 4 kids in there right now, and they all want to become teachers. And so they're getting that experience. They're getting field work in education. But I also had the ability to go in January to the Philippines with a team of teachers and principals, and we hired 34 teachers out of that group. And so when you did the cost benefit analysis, when you look at the cost for us to go there and to hire the teachers, it came out to about $500 a teacher that we hired, as opposed to me attending job fairs. I was just in a job fair in New Mexico. That cost us $1,450. And I was able to get 1 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm scheduled to go to Nebraska and Oregon. And, again, those are costing us, $2,000 to go there. But the impact sometimes isn't as great, again, when you run that cost benefit analysis. But we've been also able to partner with Proximity Learning for a semester with one of our middle schools, Carmel Community School. And that really has helped us out tremendously, because we didn't have anyone to cover ELA. We didn't have anyone to cover science. And so through Gilmore Green, through Proximity Learning, we were able to get that coverage and had kids engaged with a teacher, albeit virtual, have a teacher in that classroom, giving them the content that they needed. And so those are just some things that we're continuing to work on, continue improving. But those are just some of the recruiting methods that we have gone. I mean, we use Facebook, we use Instagram, all the normal social media stuff. But again, it was powerful to be able to bring on Proximity Learning on top of all the other things that we're doing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I also find your work overseas to be so fascinating. How did you even come to learn that that was an option?
So we had partnered with a company about 3-4 years ago, because again, we weren't seeing the numbers coming in, and that actually worked. And then we brought in another 8 in September through that same organization, because we found some quality teachers from there. And so we knew we needed to get on board very quickly, which is why we went to the Philippines. But that's part of the networking that, in human resources you have to do when you're trying to find people to fill classrooms. You've got to start reaching out and branching out and talking to folks about possibilities. And that, again, that's how we got to learning about proximity learning. And we were able to implement you all very quickly.
Very cool. So when it comes to bringing in teachers from overseas, something that I think anybody listening might be wondering about is when you go to a country in which their home native language is not English, how does that impact their ability to teach your students?
So one of the things that we make sure when we go over, when we went overseas or we hired folks from the Philippines, they have to be fluent in English. And so one of the criteria that we have before we even do an interview is that they are proficient in the language, in English language. And so everyone that we have brought over can have a normal conversation like we're having now, and not have to worry about, are they processing the information, and then you got to give them some wait time in order for them to reply. It is instantaneous.
Right.
So it's been really great, and our kids have really appreciated the diversity and the culture that our teachers from the Philippines have brought and will continue to bring, because we're going to continue to partner with them, since we're not able to really grow our own teachers in the numbers that we need.
For sure. I was going to just say, I bet your students are really benefiting from this and the exposure that they're having to other cultures, because oftentimes, especially in our rural districts, it's kind of like that's the world that that's all there is outside of those walls for you, is just more of what you know. And so the fact that we're able to bring in people from other countries and expose them to culture and to language and to interests, and even just, I would imagine it's a learning experience for the teachers as well to come here and try to acclimate as quickly as possible, but I'm sure they also probably appreciate the opportunity to share some of back home with their students. So what a unique model you all are implementing, and it sounds like so far it's successful. I hope it continues to be successful for you. Oh, I also wanted to mention, when I was in high school, I did the Ready, Set, Teach program, which sounds comparable to your teaching cadets, except we didn't get college credit, but we had all the field experience. I had a 0 hour and a first period where every Monday through Friday, I was teaching a classroom from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. and it was so much fun. So I enjoyed that a lot. And I hope that the people who are going through your program are finding it to be equally as beneficial for them. It was great experience and preparation before actually doing student teaching at the university level. So going to our next question, do you see a virtual option as a viable solution for the ongoing teacher shortage, and why? You did mention proximity. What else would you like to say about this?
Well, and I'll share with you, just so you know, there's a company here in Colorado Springs that is getting ready to do something very similar to what you're doing. But to answer your question, what proximity learning is doing, but to answer your question, do you see a virtual option as a viable solution? Absolutely, I do. And I know that there's a couple of other states that are using proximity learning, because it is a great way to fill the need immediately. And I think the conversation that got us started was Gil's email to me, which was never have to worry about a vacancy again. And that caught my attention, because again, we had so many vacancies. And so we were able to make it work to where we had a paraprofessional in the classroom with the proximity learning teacher. And again, it went fairly smooth from the onset. And so again, thank you to proximity learning, thank you to Gilmore. But I do see it as a viable solution in classes that can be taught through the virtual option.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Yeah, virtual option definitely does seem like it might be the way of the future here. We know that it's not going to be it's not a catch-all. It's not going to be the thing that solves all of our teacher shortage problems, but I think it's important that we keep it as an option in our arsenal as we try to continue to combat this issue. It's a persistent challenge that we're seeing right now. Doesn't seem to be getting much better. And so the idea that you can use this as just one of many viable options, I think, is important for people to be mindful of. So what recommendations do you suggest for districts that have a lot of teacher vacancies that continue to persist during the school year? Is there anything they can do? We're in December, we're in February, we're in April, and we still have these shortages. What should they do?
Yeah, so Dr. Willis, if you don't mind, I want everyone who's on the call to know I don't get paid for the recommendations or the promotion that I'm doing for proximity learning. Please don't think that. But it was an opportunity for us really to fill two positions that we couldn't fill in an urgent situation, and so they were able to step up to the plate and get us what we needed. And so again, I just want everyone to know I don't get paid for my endorsement. I just think it's a great way if you have that vacancy to fill it. So let me share with you what's happening in Colorado, because I think it's important to put it into context. And this is the latest data that came from Colorado Department of Education. So the data, the most current data they have is back in 2020, 2021. So back in 2020, 2021, they had over 10,200 folks in teacher prep programs, right? Potential teachers. That number of completers went down to 3,200. Oh. So about a third of the folks who actually started in a teacher prep program actually graduated. For the entire state, they produced 764 elementary school teachers.
Wow.
I'm going to let that number sit. For an entire state, 764 elementary school teachers. That's not a lot. In fact, that's an extremely low number for our needs. And so one of the things that we continue to do is promote that alternative license. So other districts look at the possibility of creating a program to where your classified staff have the ability to become a teacher through an alternative program. Think about, and again, I don't get paid for this recommendation, but think about proximity learning as a way to fill gaps that you can immediately get taken care of in the right class. And I think that's important for folks to know. I will tell you that job fairs are not the way to go, because I've been to several of them already this year. And like I said, I shared with you my experience in New Mexico. I was up at Greeley, Colorado in November. We actually had 50 recruiters and there were 9 teacher applicants.
Wow.
Yes, so the outlook is not great, but you've got to start thinking outside the box. You've got to start looking at what you have internally, what you can do internally, and then again, look at other organizations who can provide that support. But I think that's, my recommendation is start trying to build from internally. You have to figure out how to get some money to pay for folks to go through alternative licensure programs, because if they're paraprofessionals, they don't make enough as it is already. And so you want to supplement that college prep or that teacher prep program with some money in the district.
Yeah, I totally appreciate you sharing those perspectives as well. The idea that we do have to continuously be creative, because when you think about what job fairs used to look like, I think back to when I started teaching and I wanted to find my first teaching job, and I went to a job fair, and from the parking lot, there were lines outside of every door of the gym, multiple exits, every one of them had lines and people flowing out of it, because there were so many of us who were so eager to teach and get our first job. Mm-hmm. And it just was one of those things where that's not where we're at anymore. When you say you have 9 applicants, that's wild. When I think about, there were hundreds and hundreds of the ones that I went to for what was a 4-hour career fair over 10, 15 years ago. So times have absolutely changed. I also want to kind of make a nod to Mindy, who's dropped a comment in the chat talking about what are we doing for these veteran teachers. So I know we're spending a lot of time talking about recruitment. What are we doing about retention?
So one of the things that we're doing, we're looking at increasing our salaries, the base salary for our teachers, but we're doing our best to be able to provide incentives, a salary increase or a step increase for our returning teachers. And, that's, at the end of the day, that's really what they're looking for. How are you going to take care of me? You're going to increase the base salary, but then you have compression that sometimes can take into effect. And when you're talking about, you have your veteran teachers, but you're going to bring in a new teacher or a teacher who may not have as many years of experience, make the same salary as one who has, 5 or 6 years because of the compression. that becomes disheartening, which is why when we do our salaries, we do to the base and then to returning staff, because we've got to be able to separate that for them. The other piece that we're trying to do is create leadership opportunities for our staff who are great teachers, but are looking at the next opportunity for them without going to another district. And so just creating, whether it's district literacy coaches or school literacy coaches, to be able to support their professional growth and have them stay within the district.
Perfect. I've heard many other districts being able to utilize creative benefits. Sometimes we can't change the bottom dollar, but we can do some other things that might incentivize you to stay. So for example, I've heard after you've been with us for so many years, you become eligible for tuition reimbursement. After you've been with us for so many years, you become eligible for paid time off where you can volunteer in the community, pursue your own professional growth. There are opportunities for you to access benefits, but you have to kind of put your years in first. And so that's one way where we can continue to retain people who are with us and they're good and we want to keep them. But we also know that there are these constraints. There are just so many financial and budgetary constraints, which also might be something that we're mindful of when we continue to go internationally. We just heard how much money we can save by going internationally, but at the same time, you want to invest in your own and you want to have some homegrown teachers. So it's walking this fine line, this balance, but at the same time, recognizing as much as we want to have homegrown teachers, especially students who have graduated from our district, come back and teach in our district. That's like the ultimate goal, because we just know that you've produced success and they're able to continue to pour into their community. But if they're not there and they don't want to be there, how do we continue to teach the students that still need an education? So there's so much to consider as an administrator. I know you guys are in a really tough spot right now, but it sounds like you are approaching this at every angle and absolutely thinking through the implications of your choices and how this is affecting student quality education. And at the end of the day, are students learning? Like that has to be the question we ask ourselves. And so being able to facilitate student learning the best way possible, as effectively as possible, I think that's really all we can ask of you. So how does your district set itself apart as a quality educational option for families? What are you doing at your district that would make people choose you?
Yeah, so you mentioned something that I think is very important and key to what we do. So, I'm in charge of technology, professional development. I'm in charge of human resources. I'm in charge of several other departments. But we start every meeting with, what have you done for students today? Yeah. Because if we don't start with that, then we lose the focus. And so when you talk about how does a district set itself apart, we are starting to see a current trend that has made an impact in many of our schools. We're now moving to a lot of K-8 schools. And our community has really gravitated towards a K-8 school. And it makes sense. You start them off in kindergarten, they go all the way through to 8th grade. They know the principal, they know the assistant principal, they get to build relationships with staff. And so our K-8 schools, we just, Soaring Eagles Community School is a brand new one. They're already full. And they're at 6th grade. They're going to start 7th grade next year. They already have a list of kids that are getting ready to go there. And so we're meeting that demand. We also have a great program with our community college that our kids already enrolled in concurrent enrollment. Last year, we had about 50 kids graduate from high school with their associate's degree.
Wonderful.
Which is pretty awesome. One of our high schools just started a nursing program. And so we approved $180 million bond. And part of that increase was to make sure that Sierra High School had a nursing program there. So when you walk in there, it looks exactly like you would go into an emergency room. The curtains, the beds, the health monitors, all of that. It looks absolutely great. We also have a junior ROTC for the Air Force program at the other high school. And we have kids there successful. In fact, I'll share with you a quick little story. One of the Air Force junior ROTC was one of my students when I was the principal, and she's now a teacher at the high school where they have the JROTC. Another great thing about our district is we do not have our students pay for any of the athletics that they have, whether it's band, football, soccer, because we are a Title I district. We're able to absorb that cost. So our kids can play in any sport, in any activity for free. And that's why we have a lot of kids continue to come back to our school district, because they know they're getting experiences that they wouldn't get in any other district without having to incur the cost themselves. So those are, we also have an online class. I forgot about that. We have Aspire Online. It's a unique niche that we have, and we have about 100 families participating in that online school, but that was a need met from COVID.
Yeah.
From the
It's
pandemic.
so interesting. At this point in time in education, students, it feels like, have more options than they've ever had before. They have their traditional neighborhood school. We also see a rising of charter schools. There are private schools, home schools, virtual schools. There are a lot of options right now. And so one thing that we continue to see districts doing, just as you had mentioned you all are doing, is you increase opportunity to unique courses, because that is what you can do to set yourself apart. Because although they might get the same core classes no matter where they go, the opportunities that they have access to at your district is really what can set you apart. And so I know at Proximity, for example, we have the opportunity to provide Chinese and American Sign Language and German, and whatever those languages are that sometimes might be really hard to staff because you are limited to your geographical boundaries of people who are licensed to teach and fluent in that language. We're able to provide that. Another one is, of course, the CTE courses that you were just talking about. We're seeing so many culinary arts courses and welding courses. There are courses at almost anything you could, the vet tech programs are pretty incredible too. And the cosmetology programs, like there are programs that districts can be implementing that really do help set them apart, and not just set them apart for the sake of, well, we want more students to attend, but it is because you are providing opportunities for students that will quite literally change their lives. And so I think it's pretty wonderful that you start with that question that you did. What are you doing for students? And being able to offer them these opportunities really goes a long way. And so it sounds like your district is doing incredible things to set itself apart. Well, we like to ask everybody who's on our webinar as a guest the following two questions. So this one might deviate a little bit from the conversation that we've been having, but I'm just curious, since you are such an expert in your field, what professional development or resources or topics would you recommend other educational administrators or teachers explore as they continue to prepare for this new season of recruitment and retention?
So Dr. Willis, that's a great question. And the reason I say that's a great question is what we're starting to see are young people coming into the profession without the real why. They just know they want to become a teacher, but don't understand the why. And so what we have been focusing on is the why is that kid in front of you. And if you ever hear us talk, we never call our kids students. And the reason we don't call them students is because if we don't own them, if they're not my kid, then we're not going to be able to move forward. And so we always engage, how are your kids doing? What do your kids need from us? Because that just shifts the focus, shifts the mindset. And so what we're trying to do with professional development in our district is essentially say, what do your kids need? They need someone who's a nurturer. They need someone who's a listener. They need someone who provides empathy. And so when we talk about professional development, we talk about understanding those SEL components, understanding themselves, understanding implicit bias, so that way they can provide that care that our kids need. And it's so important that we did, through the Equity Council, we did a book study on Robert Jackson, Becoming the Educator that they need. It's about 127 pages. It's a quick read. But the number one thing we all took away was you've got to believe in your kids. Because if you don't believe in your kids, you're never going to be able to change their trajectory. So again, we promote, what is it that you can do for your kids? How can you become a better listener? What is it that they need? You got to be that warm demander from your kids. You've got to understand their situation, but you've got to have high expectations for them. And so we weave that into our professional development. But SEL is huge. Restorative practices as well. I don't know, Dr. Willis, if you're familiar with restorative practices. We did a book study on, Don't Suspend Me, and all of our discipline is focused on restorative, reflective, and instructional. Because if we send kids home, then they're going to continue doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So we want to keep them in school. The other piece that we're working on is appropriate technology. Our parents nowadays while they're not digital natives like our kids are, but they get social media, they get that. And so we want to make sure that we provide them like Classroom Dojo, other tools that they can use to engage our families. So I know that was a lot, and I apologize if I rambled on a little bit, but there are just so many things, again, that we want to make sure our kids have the right person in front of them. And so we focus on what is it that you need to make sure that you can provide what our kids need.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I have one final question for you. And before I ask you this final question, I am going to throw it back to the audience who is watching this today. If you have any questions for Dr. Claudio, please don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A box. But my final question for you is, when you encounter a challenge in education, where do you go to find the solutions?
So I'm very fortunate here in Colorado. We have a CASPA group, and we feed each other all kinds of information and try to figure out what's going to make sense for our district. But I have no choice but to attend a lot of conferences, a lot of seminars, because that's where all the great ideas are happening. And so I try to go out to as many as I can, because I can bring stuff back that makes sense for our district. So HR groups, seminars, conferences that make the most sense for us.
I've got on the PowerPoint right now on the deck that we have my email and Dr. Claudio's email. If you think of any questions after this that you're like, oh, I wish I would have said something, or I was too shy to say something in front of everybody else, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. We are here as resources for you. We want to thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar, and we hope to see everybody here for our next webinar. We'll be having in just a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about some testing strategies. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.